Yeah, thanks for willing to do this.
Oh no, my pleasure. It's always interesting to hear that people have rediscovered Astro Boy.
Well, I actually had the biggest affinity with your roles in Sailor Moon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Good. Those are more obscure, so it's nice to know that people have rediscovered Chad then. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
So I can just start from the beginning, and I did read up on how you got into acting, just for anybody that doesn't know, if you can
You
start
want me to run
something.
through it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm no longer an actor. I haven't been an actor for a long time, but
Right.
I had a 20-year career. So I started when I was 8 and I retired from the industry when I was 28. And yeah, it happened just because my brothers and I used to complain to my mom that we didn't have enough spending money. And so she signed us up with a modeling agency when I was 8, and we started modeling for, at the time, like paper catalogs for department stores and billboards for different products. And very quickly that turned into sort of on camera work where we started doing movies and TV commercials and episodic television shows. And things just sort of snowballed from there for the three of us. Um, I ended up starting in voice work in particular when I was about 11 or 12 years old, because we were living in Montreal at the time. And Montreal in Canada was a sort of hub for dubbing because a lot of American movies needed to be dubbed into French. So they had a lot of sound studios that were doing sort of voiceovers of soundtracks so they could be produced in one language or the other. And it just so happened that like 1984, 1985, the mid 80s were the time when anime was first being imported to North America for English language dubs, and Montreal was the place where it was being done. So, yeah, by the time I was 12, I started working pretty regularly as a voice actor. And at 12 was when I did Astro Boy, actually. That was my first big role that I landed.
How did you take to voice acting opposed to
I,
on camera?
yeah, I loved it. I really, really liked it. The technique is really interesting. I don't know if you know the technique that was used in Canada at the time. Do you know anything about the rhythmo band?
Yeah, I've talked to other voice actors at the time that explain
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the rhythmo band technique was sort of technical and a little difficult to master, but I think because I was a kid, I picked it up very quickly. Basically, you're standing in a sound studio. There's a recording booth outside. You're wearing headphones, and on a movie projector in front of you, you can see the animation because the animation has been done in another language already. And above the screen with the video is another long, thin screen with a bar that hangs down. And your dialogue moves very quickly from right to left. And as each word hits the bar, you have to speak each letter and each word, and the words have been synchronized with the mouth flaps, which are already drawn. So it's a totally different approach than doing it where the animation hasn't been created yet. Those types of animated voice roles are really fun to do because you just go into a studio, you put on the headset, and you just act, and they just record it, and then the animators draw based on what you've captured. This
Right.
is like reverse engineering it. You have to match the expression to what's already been animated, and the timing is really tight, right? You have to get, especially like the B's, the P's, and the M's in English. Every time the lips close, that's a flap. You got to make sure those are all in sync correctly. And I liked it. I figured it out when I was about 11 or 12, had no problem with it and really, really enjoyed it. Yeah. So the technique, I think, was interesting at the time.
And how long of a time period were you dubbing Astro Boy?
Oh gosh, so I remember I started Astro Boy the summer before I started grade 7. So we must
Okay.
have started in June or July, and we recorded all through the summer. And then I remember at the start of grade 7, which is high school in Montreal, so it was my first year of high school. We probably recorded into September and October because I remember many days going to school until about 3:15, 3:30, getting in a taxi, driving out to the east end of Montreal, or actually no, Astro Boy was shot not too far from there, actually on Sherbrooke Street West at a studio called Cine Loom Studios, which is still in existence. And then
Okay.
I would record from, I don't know, 4:30 until 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And then my parents would come pick me up, drive me home. I'd do my homework till midnight or 1 in the morning, go to sleep, and at 6 o'clock wake up and go back to school. And I remember doing that for the first month or two of high school for sure. So it took several months to do all of them. Um, the technique with the Rhythmo band meant that sometimes I was in the studio alone. Sometimes I was with the other voice actors, but they could often put me on a track by myself, which meant we could do it in the evening.
Mhm. And how long after that was the Adventures of the Little Koala?
Oh, you really have done your homework. It was soon after. I mean, I don't remember the exact number of months, but I think the order was Astro Boy, Little Koala, Doraemon, which was called The Adventures of Albert and Sydney.
Yeah.
I think that was the order. And then there was a Japanese animated version of The Wizard of Oz that went for many, many, many episodes where I had an unusual character in there recurring. Yeah, and then at the end of my career, like towards the end, when I was finished my undergraduate in university and I was doing my master's degree, that was when we did Sailor Moon. So I was an adult by then. I was in my 20s. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So certainly starting like 11, 12 and going right through till 26, 27, 28.
I did want to bring up outside of that, I did want to bring up some on-camera stuff too. I know that you got to be in a like movie of the week with Michael Ironside pretty early on.
Oh yeah, gosh, you really have done your homework. No, I'm impressed. So you're digging up like arcana on me. That was my first movie role when I was about probably 10 or 11, maybe 11, before Astro Boy even, I think. It was a National Film Board of Canada movie, a short feature film. Yeah, and Michael Ironside was very hot at the time because he was in a sci-fi series that had a revival a few years ago called V, about like space alien lizards that were coming to the Earth disguised as humans to eat us, right? And so I, as a sci-fi fan as a kid, I was super excited to work with Michael Ironside, and that feature film was the first that I did on camera that was a movie, and that was my chance to work with him. Yeah.
And this might be obvious, but did you have a preference for doing voiceover opposed to on camera?
I like the voiceover. I always like the voiceover. And my brother Andrew did voiceover, but really liked the on-camera work. And he had a couple of back-to-back TV series that ran for many, many years. One that was a Canadian production in Quebec about a hockey team called He Shoots, He Scores. It was available in French as Lancer Compte. And then a Canada-France co-production that was a remake of Rin Tin Tin, sort of the classic cop and dog story. And he was the kid. And so he was on camera and episodic TV for, I don't know, I want to say like 10 years of his life continuously, just went on and on. And so he really excelled at that and had an agent in Hollywood and an agent in Toronto and an agent in Montreal at one point, and would travel, back and forth to California and Toronto to do his work. And throughout it all, I had much more success with the voice work, and I liked the voice work a lot more. I was a lot more self-conscious as a kid than he was.
Okay.
I didn't like as a kid walking into an audition and seeing 50 other kids who looked just like me, only they were a little taller and they had blue eyes and maybe they were a little bit more fit, right? And it's like everybody's like a slightly better version of yourself and you're all auditioning for the same role. And that was really hard for me to take. Whereas with voice work, it's just what can you do with your voice, right? And I liked that a lot more. It was more comfortable, but I had fun with both. It was a really interesting childhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know around that same time there was another TV movie that had more info that I could find, Double Standard.
Yes, yeah, there was Double Standard in there too. Yeah. I mean, this is stuff from the ancient past, right? So I barely remember some of these things, but yeah, for sure, Double Standard was one. I did a fair share of on-camera stuff. There's probably stuff that now everyone has forgotten about. I have to go back and look at my old resumes from when I was a kid, but it was pretty steady work for about a decade and a half anyway. Yeah, a lot of TV commercials for big names, big companies. Some of them were national, some of them were local. I did a horror movie at one point with a director that's pretty well known. It was a lot of fun, and it co-starred Terry Quinn, who ended up going off and doing Lost after that on TV, right? So that's one that today in my current career, when people find out about that, then they think that's good fun because it's got a little bit of a cult following too. It was called Pin, the movie. Yeah,
it's actually one of my single favorite horror movies. So
is it really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's so many of these things like the voice work. We did it at the time, and we didn't think anybody would ever take it seriously. When anime first arrived, it was very different than the style of animation that I had grown up seeing from like Disney. Right? It was very stylized. The humor was very different because it was from a different culture. The food that the characters were eating, we didn't really know what they were eating in a lot of the scenes because, Canadians in particular hadn't been exposed, I think, to a lot of, dumplings or dim sum or things that in Asia were more popular at the time.
Right.
So it was just a very foreign look. It looked very different. And I remember early on where we would be dubbing some of these series and just joking, saying no one will ever watch this. It's too unusual, right? And little did we know it was going to become the big thing, that was the trend that animation was taking, was towards these imported anime features. Yeah. So that was a lovely surprise. And there were challenges with importing these things culturally, because sometimes the humor didn't translate. So I know in Astro Boy, there were scenes they had to cut out, and that's why sometimes the story doesn't make a lot of sense. Same thing with Sailor Moon. The episodes were cut down quite a lot because in Japan, they'd been marketed sort of to like 18 to 25-year-old males, but in North America, they wanted to market them to 9 to 12-year-old girls. So a lot of the more risky sort of, stuff got cut out and sanitized for a younger audience in North America at the time. But so there were like plot challenges that would come up when you cut out pivotal scenes because they might be deemed inappropriate or culturally just too strange to include. There were problems then for the story that we had to figure out.
Right. Yeah. And early on with the early voice credits, did you get a sense of that you were like acting at, like, or was it more just kind of like a fun thing?
No. We always took it really seriously. It was a career. Okay. It was a career, and my parents and I and my brothers had an understanding that we would work hard at it. And I took acting lessons. I was very conscious of my voice, very conscious of dialect. I had coaching on that kind of stuff as a kid. And, we were always told, you're doing this as a profession, and you're working with adult actors for whom it's their living. Like, you really, when you do any type of acting, it's often collaborative, and the team really relies on one another for good performances. So we had to take it very seriously. And as kids, we had to maintain an A average in school. That was the deal that my parents made. As long as we could maintain an A average, we could keep acting. So I had to work hard on both fronts to sustain my game. Yeah.
And with Pin, is there more of a story and memory that you have being on that?
No, there's a funny anecdote. There's a scene in Pin where young Leon's mother, who was played by an actress who I had worked with for many years, a very, very sort of recognizable Canadian actress from the 80s and 90s, Bronwyn Mantell. We had worked as voice actors, probably on Astro Boy and on Little Koala. She probably did a lot of guest voices on that too. And she played my character's mother. And there's a scene where she had to slap me.
Yeah.
As he comes down the stairs, he gets slapped by his mom. The director, Sandy Stern, felt that my timing for the stage slap was a little bit off. Like, she would move in and I was supposed to move, but I think I was wincing a little bit and worrying that she was going to actually hit me. And I don't know if he said to Bronwyn, just hit him for real, or if I didn't move quickly enough, or if she just got really caught up in the moment. But for whatever reason, she made hard contact with my face. Oh. And so the scene looks pretty realistic, because I think that's the take that they ended up keeping, where she actually did slap me. Yeah. And she felt so badly. She felt really, really badly. And I was shocked, but then I started laughing, and it was just a really weird thing that happened. It worked theatrically, but yeah. I think in general, adult actors try not to slap child actors on the set. It's frowned upon, right? So, yeah.
Did you get to interact much with David Hewlett and Cynthia? And
yeah, a little bit. But a lot of it, when you're shooting a movie, scenes get blocked off according to location and cast, right? And so because a lot of my scenes were either in flashback or earlier parts of the script, they wouldn't have been scheduled to work on those days. So we would have seen each other from time to time crossing as we changed locations, or in post-production, or at the wrap party and things like that. But usually you work with the people that are in the scenes that you're with.
And there was another looks kind of intense on camera movie with Malaric.
Oh, Malaric. Yes. Malaric. I had forgotten about Malaric. Yeah. I don't remember what the script was. It was so long ago, but yeah, Malaric is in there for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there was I did one period production that I really liked as a kid. It was a film adaptation of the famous Canadian author Mordecai Richler's novel, Joshua Then and Now. Okay. And, as an actor on your CV, you put down all of your skills that you have, right? Like your non-acting skills. And so I think my CV said, judo and horseback riding and competitive swimming, right? And anyway, I got cast in this role, which was a period drama. And after they cast me, the casting agent or the director said to me, "Oh, you can ride a horse, right?" And I remember as a kid going, "Sure, I could," because it was on my CV. I could ride a horse. Yeah, put me on a horse. I won't fall off. And he sort of looked at me and said, "Yeah, maybe we'll get you some riding lessons before we start filming, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, and so actually I love horses and I do ride, and that was the first time I ever rode, was because I got this role acting, and the
Mhm.
character had to ride in at a good trot posting, and so they needed me to look convincing. So yeah, so the production company paid for riding lessons for me.
Okay.
Yeah, which was nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of on camera, like what is the most difficult role or experience that you had?
Oh, I mean, it's a lot of, acting is a lot of hurry up and wait. And
Yeah.
for kids, that's a challenge. Like you have to get to set early very often. You have to go through hair and makeup. And then you sit in your trailer and you wait until it's your turn, because they're filming other scenes or other angles or other actors. And so I think as a kid, one of the challenges is staying focused, right? It's hard when you're on set for 12 hours a day to stay focused. If maybe you're not getting used till after lunch, but you got called early and because of whatever reasons they didn't get to you when they were supposed to. I think that's a challenge for a lot of young child actors. It was a challenge too, because for us, there wasn't the same pressure. We were doing it for fun and because we enjoyed it. And I don't know that I always realized, and maybe it's a good thing as a kid that I didn't realize how serious it was for all the adults that were involved, that there was a lot of money at stake and that timing really mattered. So I think as I got older, I started to figure out the nature of the industry a lot more, and I became better at moderating myself that way and not just assuming everyone was just having a good fun time like I was, that this was a business and a job. So I grew into that probably. Yeah.
Okay. And I know that one of the primary original animation series you got to be a part of was Little Rosie.
Yes, that's right. I did Little Rosie in Toronto for a studio at the time that was called Nelvana. Now it's called Chorus Entertainment, I think. And that was the opposite of the Rhythm Band. That was a case where we did record the dialogue blind in a studio with a script. So we had a lot more freedom then, which was amazing fun. And it involved a Hollywood celebrity that I knew. So I thought that was kind of neat. And the animation quality was very high. So I was actually really pleased with the end product on that. I was proud of that job when it came out.
And with voice acting prior to Sailor Moon, like with the early roles, was there any kind of negative experience, or was it mostly all positive for you?
Everyone was really kind and supportive. They knew I was younger. There was a lot of mentoring that happened, a lot of good training and teaching that happened. I worked with amazingly talented voice actors who could do things with their voice that I didn't realize could be done. And so I really learned a lot from them. The challenging part as a child was just the stamina. Like, again, having to be in the studio for a long time after you'd been in school all day, it was very tiring. But we really loved it. And so I knew that I wanted to do it, and I just plowed through. But I don't know how I appeared to others. If sometimes I was annoying when I would get silly, probably I was a kid, I got silly. But for me, I think it was probably just the stamina that it took. It was hard physical work too, which you don't really think of, right? But it takes a lot of physical energy to be performing all the time.
Right.
Yeah. And there's a lot of juggling as a kid, right? Like when I wasn't acting, I was auditioning. So 2 or 3 times a week after school, when I wasn't recording a series like Astro Boy or Little Koala or Albert and Sydney, my mom would pick me up from high school and we'd drive to the casting agents and I would audition. And then we'd have to drive home in rush hour traffic and have dinner and do homework. So it was a lot. It's like doing an extracurricular, right? Like if you do hockey and you're traveling with a team, it takes up a lot of your outside of school time. It's co-curriculars, extracurriculars are demanding. And for us, it was like that.
And what your last on camera role would have been in the Rin Tin Tin series?
Maybe. Yeah, that probably sounds about right. That was my brother's TV series, and I got one guest spot on one episode as a sort of just fun thing to do. I think they thought it would be a lark because they knew that Andrew had an older brother and that he had acted. And so, yeah, I did do a guest spot, and that shot in downtown Toronto. I remember that at a high school off of Bayview Avenue, around Bayview and Eglinton. Yep.
And so how did Sailor Moon come along?
Sailor Moon came along at a great time in my life. Like I said, I was starting my master's degree, I think, at the University of Toronto. And my agent sent me off on the audition and I got the part, and it ran for a long time. Like it was a good gig for an actor to get. And because I wasn't one of the main characters, it ended up being, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 evenings a month that I'd have to be in the studio. And they knew I was a student in school, and they would always schedule me in the evening. So I would work like 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock at night.
Okay.
And it was like a dream job because I could be in school full time. I could focus on my studies. I could have my life in order, and then a few times a month go out and record for a short amount of time and make a little bit of money on the side to help pay off school. So it was a great job. And I worked with a really amazing French Canadian director and production company, and the cast were unbelievably kind and friendly, and again, very talented voice actors. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it was a wonderful experience. And the only reason I stopped was that around that time, I applied to do a PhD, and I did my PhD, and then at the end of it, I received a postdoctoral fellowship from the Canadian government. And one of the terms of the postdoc funding was I couldn't work outside the university. I had to work as an academic only. And so I was 28 at the time, and I had to go and tell my agent, well, I think I want to give this like academic thing a try. Let's see if I could have a career as an academic. And she was like, I don't know, you're going to walk away from acting? And I was like, well, I kind of feel like I've done it for 20 years and I want to try this other thing now, right? And so it did. Luckily, it did work out, knock on wood, and I was able to start an academic career, and it was a good career transition for me. But yeah, otherwise I would have kept going probably, and just done a little bit of work on the side, because I do miss the creative dimensions of that industry, working with really creative, talented people that are artists. I work in an industry now where I'm surrounded by really brilliant intellectuals, but it doesn't have the same type of creative energy. It's different, right? And so I do, having experienced both worlds, sometimes I miss the sort of crazy creativity of the entertainment industry.
And with coming up with the voice for Chad, I know that in the original English dub that he has more of like a surfer voice. Was that how you were directed?
They asked me, what do you want to do with the character? They showed me a picture of the character, and he had crazy long hair, and it just came out. I just said I could go like totally like surfer dude for you if you want. And they were like, well, give it a try. Let's see how it sounds. And we did it, and everyone laughed. And they said, that's the voice. That's Chad for English. So it's weird to think, with a sort of samurai type, martial arts character, that I would have come up with that. I don't know why it occurred to me, but it seemed to work, and they were happy with it, and it was fun to do. Yeah.
And several other voice actors I've talked to from that original cast have said that Nicole, that she could have been, she could have been like really difficult to work with.
No, not for me. No, okay. I mean, I loved, like I said, I had a really great French Canadian production team, and Nicole Thureau was part of that. And I loved working with her. I loved it. She was, she knew what she wanted. That's part of what you might have been picking up on from other people was she had a very clear idea of how she wanted to get it. And if you weren't giving it to her, she would keep pushing you and say, no, I'm not believing it, right? And there were times I remember being in the studio with her where I was frustrated because I knew I wasn't giving her what she wanted, and she knew that I wasn't giving her. And that's a hard experience as a performer, right? To like keep missing the cue, but eventually she would get it out of you, which was amazing. And then she'd get you to where she needed you to be, and it was good direction in that sense. And by the end, she allowed me to try directing 1 or 2 episodes too, which was a fantastic experience for me. I don't remember if it was on Sailor Moon or if it was on a production she did immediately after Sailor Moon. But I spent a couple of days in the studio actually doing the directing job. And for someone who started off as an 8 or 9-year-old watching the director's work 20 years later, to be able to do that, that was a great opportunity to close the loop for me and to really feel like, now I've seen how the whole thing comes together. I understand the whole system, which was fun. And she gave me that opportunity, which was very generous of her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know in the first Sailor Moon movie, you got to be the main villain, Fiore.
Oh, yes, you're right. You know more than I do. That's fantastic. Yeah. I like doing villains. Villains are always fun because you can be like so over the top and so evil, right? It gives you a lot of range, which is nice.
Mm. Is there much memory about that specifically?
Nope. It all blurred into one. Like, honestly, we were in the Sailor Moon grind. We just kept churning them out, right? So I wish I could tell you that I did remember it. Sometimes what happens is if I go back and watch them, then it triggers memories a lot more. There's just been so much time and space now that everything is blurred together pretty much, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if there's an online version that you can point me to, I might get a kick out of watching that movie for sure.
Okay.
I think I have them all on VHS tape in the basement. The problem is I don't have a VCR anymore.
Okay.
I know for Astro Boy I do. I have the full set of Astro Boy.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the nice things about Sailor Moon, just talking about the evolution that occurred, not just in my career, but during my career, was when I started dubbing in the mid 1980s. You had to be a member of the Actors Union, which in Canada is called ACTRA. Voice work was not regulated the way that on-camera work was. And so when I did the Canadian dub, the 1985 dub of Astro Boy, I didn't get a credit. Yeah. So they used my voice for all of those episodes. It ran in syndication for, I don't know, like a decade and a half or 15 years. It was on TV nonstop in this country. It moved to VHS tape. It moved to DVD. You know, there were a lot of updates and re-releases using my voice, and I never got a credit for it. I never got royalties for it. I got paid just to do the work when I was 12, and that was it. There was no continuous source of income. And gradually over the length of my career, it was acknowledged that that was unjust and unfair to performers. So by the time we were doing Sailor Moon, it was accredited work, and there was proper compensation given. And it was a much more professionalized working environment, whereas I started off in very much the Wild West. And that was really hard for me for a long time to accept, especially when I was an older teenager, knowing that my voice was on TV every day and that people my age were still watching Astro Boy, and I'd get teased about it. And for a long time, it really bothered me that my energy and my talent and my voice was being used constantly, and there was no recognition. It wasn't even about the money, like the residual payments. It was more that my name wasn't attached to it, and that other people were making money off of my voice. And that bothered me. So I was really grateful that by the time Sailor Moon came along, the industry had become more regulated and more professionalized. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that actors who are coming up behind me wouldn't ever get exploited the way that I had in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the reason I was bringing up Fiore too is that it was a case in the original dub where when he came to Earth, he was friends and he was in love with the main male character, like Darien, Tuxedo Mask. Yeah. And then obviously in the original dub, it had to be changed to he was like they were just really close friends.
Yeah. I mean, like I said to you, that's kind of what I was alluding to, right? There was a lot of that sort of sanitization of the storyline, which, in hindsight seems so dated, because today no one would think anything of that. It would just be accepted that this was how but North American society had to catch up a lot more, especially on the LGBTQ front and on this sexuality issues. And it was a much more mature series for a more mature audience. And the politics in North America at the time was different. And that's really unfortunate. But I hope that they've redubbed and remastered those stories, and that people who watch them now can see them in their original forms.
Yep. Yeah. And were you, or if you still are, friends with anybody who was part of the Sailor Moon cast?
I wish I could say that I was still kept in touch with people, but my career moved in a very, very different direction, right? And so I know that over the years, I've gone back to like Comic-Cons and things like that, where there have been tables, and occasionally I've stopped by and said hello, and everyone's like, oh, hey, nice to see you. How you doing, right? But what happens is when you change industries, you're moving in different worlds, right? And so you just don't see people. You don't have the same. And I also physically moved. I moved away from where that series was recorded to a different city now. So I'm not in that place anymore. Yeah.
And all throughout your career, is there a single most interesting or highlighted memory that you have that you haven't already mentioned?
I think I've given you some of the anecdotes. I just remember, I remember even at the time when I was a kid thinking, this is a really unusual way to grow up. It's different than what most people are experiencing, right? And at first it was really difficult because there was a lot of teasing that happened, and, a little bit of bullying when I was younger. But as I got older, I realized the opportunities that it was affording me were so rich and so different that they really gave me a very different perspective on the world, on working, on collaboration, on a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. When my brother was filming that series you mentioned, Rin Tin Tin Canine Cop, I was 16 by that point.
Okay.
And the production company was paying him a salary every day and then a per diem. So per diem is just a bit of money that you get for pocket money when you're working on set out of the country. And my mother was with my brother Andrew at the time. And so she was also getting a per diem. And they saved up their per diems and were able to fly me over to Paris for 2 weeks. And they had been given 2 condos right in downtown Paris for the 6 or 10 weeks that they were filming. They moved into one condo and they gave me the other condo, and they gave me an envelope full of cash, the extra per diem that they had saved. And they said, okay, Andrew's going to be on set 5 days a week. You're here for 2.5 weeks. Here's some money. Go out and see Paris. And I was 16 years old. And like that that opportunity really, really, really changed my world. It was the first time I was exposed to museums and great art and great food, and went to, the ballet and saw the Paris Opera House. And by the end of that trip, I came back and I was finishing high school in Ontario at the time. And I knew that no matter what I did with my life, whatever career I was going to land on, I wanted to be able to travel to Europe and have money to go to museums and have money to eat in nice restaurants and enjoy art and culture at that level. And it really set me on a path then to find a career that would allow me to engage Europe's cultural diversity. And that was solely because of the acting that we were doing. My parents were very hardworking parents, very middle-class parents, and they never would have been able to give their 16-year-old son that kind of opportunity. So, being exposed to really creative, talented people, seeing how hard people can work to produce something great and beautiful that others will consume and enjoy, being able to travel and see the world, all of those opportunities came about because of my early acting. And so I've always been very, very, very grateful that I had those opportunities at an early age, because they shaped who I became, and they now are part of my core values that I share with my kids, right? I want them to grow up in a world that's full of art and beauty and travel and good food and culture too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And ever since you left acting, has there been any hard feelings to go back to it, or?
No. It was a chapter, right? Like don't forget, 20 years is a long time to be doing any one thing. And I always felt like it was a whole career, that when you've done something for 2 decades, it feels like you've had a whole career. And so, if anything, when I then started my next career, feel as if I was well equipped to deal with the normal types of professional challenges that people encounter when they move into a new business, because I'd had a lot of experience dealing with challenges at an earlier age, right? And I knew how to negotiate, I knew how to advocate, I knew how to build a team, because actors have teams around them. You have, agents, managers, business people who are handling your finances. So I knew when I moved into my next career how to work on a team. Actors work collaboratively. As I said, when you're on stage or in front of the camera, you're working in an ensemble. So I knew how to build those types of collaborations. And I feel like one of the reasons I've had some success in my next career was because I learned those skills at a very young age. And other people learn them differently. Like I used the example of being on a hockey team. I think kids that grow up playing competitive sports, they learn a lot of the same things, right? When to subsume your own ego and do what's best for the group, when to take direction, when the coach tells you to do something. I didn't get that through sports. I got that through acting. But one way or another, it's really important to learn that at a young age, because then you hit a point in life where it's expected that you know how to do those things. And if you haven't, it's a lot more difficult. So I never resented it. I never regretted leaving it. I miss it sometimes, like I said, because I miss the energy. But I really feel like one thing transitioned into another very, very, very appropriately for me, and I was glad for that.
And would your advice that you'd give for anybody who would want to pursue acting that's younger be different, considering how you were brought up? Or
well, it's a good question. I mean, my daughters, I have 2 daughters, and they often at different times in their childhood asked me if they could act. And what I always said to them, this might interest you, is, yeah, when you're 18.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's a really hard existence. I think I've expressed to you how much I enjoyed it and I value it in hindsight, but I remember physically being tired a lot, right? And being pulled in a lot of different directions. And I wanted my kids just to be able to focus on being kids. And, and I always said to them, if that's something you want to start when you're a teenager, then I'll support you in it for sure. But I would advise any child that wants to get into acting, or anybody who wants to get into acting, that it is a lot of hard work. And as I said, it takes not just a lot of training and talent and discipline, but a lot of physical stamina too. And you have to be very resilient. Like, it is hard on kids. One of the things I tried to protect my children against was that audition syndrome that I described to you earlier, where you walk into a room and there's 30 people or 50 people who look like a better version than you. That's really hard on a kid's self-esteem, right? And that was hard on my self-esteem growing up, right? Being told, "Oh, you did a great audition. The director loved you. You were like the second pick. It's too bad you don't have blue eyes, because the adult actor has blue eyes and we want the kid to look like they're related." And you go, really? Like, I'll wear contact lenses. Like, no, we got someone else with blue eyes. Sorry, right? So as a kid being told you're almost good enough, that can be a hard message for kids to internalize. And I would say any kid that wants to get into acting, it's really important that their parents and their friends and their team protect them as much as possible from that, and talk to them about why decisions are made for casting. And it's not about you. You might have done a great job, but it's all about the fit, right? And that was something I figured out when I was much, much older. But I think as a kid, that was a little bit challenging to learn. So I usually warn kids about that if they want to get into acting. That's one of the cautionary tales. And yeah.
I'm sure you have a good answer to what you would want your legacy to be in terms of your acting career.
I don't think I have a legacy, honestly, Chris. It's kind of you to say so, but no, I mean, I'm delighted. Like I said, the young guys like you have come along and found out this stuff, and you're still interested in it. I think that's just awesome, right? Nothing makes me happier than to know that there are people out there who are still consuming it and watching it and loving it, and I just think that's terrific.
Do you still get like in real life or online or anything? Do you still get much attention for your for roles that you've had?
Well, it's strangely picked up. Like there was a long period where I get an email a year, right, from someone saying, "Hey, I found out that you did that, and is that true?" And I would either not answer them or just write back and say yes, but I don't do it anymore, right? And strangely, in the last few years, there's been an explosion of interest in this stuff, which I guess it's generational, right? And partly it's driven by the technology. So much of this is now available on the internet again, that people are rediscovering it. Yeah. And sometimes my two worlds overlap in a very strange way. So in my academic life, I wrote a book a few years ago. I don't know if it's going to come through on the camera, but it's a little book about a woman who was accused of poisoning her husband or using witchcraft to murder him in the 14th century. And it's based on a historical trial that I read. And so I wrote the book about it. And I got approached last year or the year before by a group of high school students in Canada whose teacher actually assigned them the book to read in their history class. They were in grade 12. They were doing some pretty advanced material, and the teacher had read the book in university and assigned it to the students. So the whole class read this book, and all of the class were encouraged to write to me and ask me questions about this history book that I wrote. And there were a couple of students in particular that were really keen and really engaged. And after a few email exchanges, they confessed and said, "Well, the other thing is we run an anime fan club, and we found out online that you did these roles, and we really want to ask you questions about that." And so it was this like mind-blowing convergence of my two universes where they had approached me as an academic expert, but they were also interested in my past life as a former child actor. And so that was really fun and kind of neat and interesting. It's rare that the two worlds meet like that. So yeah. Mm-hmm. And all thanks to the internet. Like all of this is the technology that's driving this renewed interest.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the way that your role as Fiore, I think seeing that at an early age for me also helped me be more aware of my sexuality, because it took me a long time to be comfortable saying that I was gay. So that's definitely one thing that helped me a lot.
Like I said, I think that is phenomenal. And I think it's amazing, in any type of art, if you see representation and you've been looking for roles or examples with which to identify. And I think that's one of the most important things that art provides to culture, especially for kids who grow up and feel a little bit disassociative with everybody else. It's really important that they find things that they can identify with, right? And I think especially if we're struggling with our own identities, we cling to those things, right? And we latch onto them, and they become lifelines in a way and keep us going in the face of a lot of challenges and negativity in our world. And sometimes a role like Fiore that, I recorded in a vacuum and didn't realize resonate in a way powerfully 20 years later with somebody else who comes along. And so it's magical. I think that can work like that. And I'm grateful to know that happened. It makes me feel a lot prouder about the work that we did. And as I said earlier, I only wish that those roles were not as heavily edited, because probably if it had been presented in a truer version, it would have had even more resonance and more importance to kids like you. Yeah. So, and luckily we're living in a world where now there's more and more examples, especially for queer kids, right? Where they don't have to read between the lines quite so much. And I think that's really, really important. Yeah.
Well, thanks. I'm glad that we got to do this.
Yeah, no, it was a great pleasure. And I'll look forward to seeing what you do with this, and feel free to keep in touch. And I wish you the best of luck with all of your endeavors, Chris. Cool.
Thanks.
All right. Take care of yourself and keep doing what you're doing.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye. Thanks a lot.